What's up guys, ATCZ here, welcome back to Yugioh Deck of the Day. Today we have an update on the Skystriker deck list. This one is probably quite different from what you're used to seeing in Skystrikers. Basically, since Engage got banned, the deck became either a deck that is winning solely by using the Needle Fiber combo to get to access code, or it was stalling with Mystic Mine. And this is not a very fun thing, especially the Mystic Mine part, because you didn't really feel like you were using the Skystriker cards to that much extent. So I think I've created something that it's not that optimal, so do not expect to have the same amount of result if you're playing Mystic Mine access code than with this build. This one is definitely worse, but it's way more fun and it abuses a lot of cool things that the Skystriker engine can do to basically facilitate a whole new engine way more consistently and way more safely than any other deck can actually do that. So I think this deck is something that you can enjoy playing with if you want to have more fun with the deck, because what was fun about Skystrikers before was the amount of advantage you could get with Engage, but you can't really do that anymore. So I tried to figure out a way to use the Skystriker engine to its fullest rather than trying to stall with Mystic Mine or trying to OTK with access code whenever you get the chance to summon a tuner with another monster on the field. So without further ado, let's begin. But before we do, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming videos, and now let's get to the deck profile. So to start off with the Skystriker monsters, we have play of course 3 Ray. I don't think I need to explain Ray, basically the best card in the deck, especially now that Engage is banned. 2 copies of Rose. In this particular version, you can actually play 3 copies of Rose if you want to. It would be really good because it helps you get 2 monsters on the field. When you summon a Skystriker monster, you can special summon her from the hand. But I think 2 is perfectly fine. I find 3 to be a little bit bricky because if she's your starter, then she doesn't give you the safety Ray does because she doesn't float herself when your monster is destroyed. To bring Rose back from the grave, you have to destroy 1 monster your opponent has in the extra monster zone. And when it does, you can bring it back to the grave, and actually it gives you a non-targeting negation until the end of the turn. So this can even play around stuff like Dragoon if you can. So if you just destroy the Anaconda they have in the extra monster zone and you try to bring back Rose, if they don't know how Rose works, then they will lose Dragoon's effect or they will be forced to negate Rose, so you can do everything else on your own. So that's also pretty good. And now we go to the spicy part of the build. We have 1 Dark Magician and 1 Red Eyes, but that's not it. We're also playing 1 Elemental Hero Neos and 1 Rainbow Dark Dragon. So basically the deck lacks power. This is what access code was meant to do. Replace power from the deck losing Engage. So you can actually go for game because the deck can grind, but it cannot really go for game because the only thing that deals damage is like if you attack with Hayata directly, or if you steal monsters with Widow Anchor and try to attack your opponent with their own monsters. So this is why access code is a good card. So I think playing Anaconda and these particular cards in the deck makes the deck a lot better. Even though these are bricks, fortunately both fusion spells require you to have them not just in your deck, but you can also use them from your hand, so that's perfectly fine if you draw them. And this gives you the power that the deck is missing. So the Skystriker engine helps you recruit all your cards, grind, protect your stuff, and Anaconda is the win condition basically. So you need these cards in order to be able to push for game. And the good thing about this deck is that I have stuff in here that makes me want to use Anaconda more than once or maybe more than twice during a duel because of a specific card, even though I only play 1 copy of each of the fusion materials, but I'll get that in a little bit later. Now for the hand traps, we play 3 copies of Ash Blossom and 3 copies of Effect Veiler. You can play Nibiru if you want, because Nibiru would also give you a monster for Anaconda. You can play Gamma, but I'm just playing the most generic ones. I'm also playing Impermanence of course, but we'll get that one, get the traps. Now for the Skystriker spells, we play 3 Widow Anchor. Really good, helps you get another monster on the field for Anaconda. It's the replacement for everything you have, so you can just basically keep grinding out, because now that you have 3, you don't mind then getting managed with multi-rolls, so it's perfectly fine. I'm maxing out on Eagle Booster, which is something that Skystriker decks have stopped playing completely. Nobody has been playing 1 copy of Eagle Booster, and I can understand why, because it doesn't really help you that much in random matchups. The card was good in the mirror match back in the day, but right now you will hardly ever see a mirror match, so you don't really need to play Eagle Booster. But in this particular deck that it relies on Anaconda so heavily, it's very important to max out on this card just to make sure that Anaconda resolves. So you can just make it unaffected by card effects, and when your opponent tries to hand drop it or negate it with something they have on the field, it will resolve, and then basically Dragoon and Rainbow Neos can clear your opponent's board. So this is why I think this card is really good. Also, if your opponent deals with Dragoon somehow and you still have Anaconda on the field, if you have 3 spells engraved, and you can use the Eagle Booster to protect your Anaconda from battle and card effects, so it's basically staying on the field, and then you can use Anaconda's effect again again during your next turn to special summon your other fusion monster, or if you have drawn a specific card I play in the deck, you can summon Dragoon again, so you can clear your opponent's board again this way. For the one-offs, play 1 Hornet Drones, which is very important in this version because it's a 1-card Anaconda, because you can just use the tokens for Kagari, then use Kagari for Hayate, and then use the token again for Shizuku or Kaina, so you get 2 effect monsters on the field, so you can summon an Anaconda this way. 1 Shark Cannon. This card is underwhelming because it's not that good of a disruption right now. The meta isn't really graveyard-based Rely decks. The only thing that would work really good against is Dinos if they discard Misk, but Dinos have kind of taken a backseat in the meta, so you're most likely seeing other stuff right now. So I think this card is still a good card, worth playing, but not more than a one-off. 1 copy of Afterburners, another card that I think just one-off is fine, because all these cards are searchable with Shizuku and with the Hayate Kagari combo, so you can use them whenever you want, and you can use them multiple times with multi-roll. So 1 Afterburners, this is solely a going second card, and this deck wants to go first, so you don't really need to see this card early. 1 multi-roll, which is still broken, because you can use all your Widow Anchors, and because you play Eagle Booster in this deck at 3-off, you will be using Eagle Booster a lot during the duels too. And the last Skystriker spell is 2 copies of Area Zero. Another card you can consider maxing out in this build, because if you see it with multi-roll, it helps you get 2 monsters on the field if you already have a hand trap or if you have a Rose or a Ray. But I think it's another card that's a bit bricky, and since the deck already runs a lot of bricks with all the vanilla monsters that you play because of the fusion materials, I think you just need to cut all the bricks you can just to make sure you don't brick a lot. Now, a really good card in this particular deck, and it's a card that people have been playing in Skystrikers in any way, but in this build is much better. So play 2 copies of Pot of Avarice. So basically you cannot run Desires in this deck, not even a heck of it, because you can just banish all your fusion materials and then your fusion spells are dead. But the cool thing about this card is that it recycles the monsters, and also instead of recycling your Skystriker monsters, in this particular build you will most likely be recycling your fusion materials, your Anaconda, and the fusion monster you want to summon. I played 2 copies of each of the fusion spell in the deck, so Pot of Avarice helps you summon them multiple times, which is something that this deck can actually do that no other Anaconda version of any deck can actually do, because you play just 1 copy of Red Edge Fusion. And it also makes Anaconda more resilient, because if you use Anaconda's effect for cost and you send your Red Edge Fusion to the grave and it gets Veilered or Impermed, then you do not have another Red Edge Fusion in your deck to use Anaconda's effect again. So even if it survives the turn, then you will not be able to use its effect again. So this is why playing 2 copies is actually really important. For the one-offs, play 1 Reinforcement of the Army, of course search your monsters, 1 Terraforming for Area Zero, 1 Monster Reborn. In this version it's good because not only it can recycle Kagari, but you can recycle your big boss monsters, so you can have more power on the field. And 1 Call by the Grave to make sure that Anaconda resolves even more, because playing 3 Eagle Booster cannot be enough sometimes, so you just need to play a little bit more. Crossout Designator will actually be a decent card for this deck, especially for this build, because you can run just 1 copy of each of the hand traps that you are afraid of getting hit by, and then play 3 Crossout Designator to make sure that you have even more protection. And for the fusion spells, I played 2 Red Eyes Fusion and 2 Neos Fusion. Like I said before, I played 2 copies of each, because you can resolve the effects of Anaconda multiple times because of Pot of Avarice. Pot of Avarice recycles the monsters, you cannot recycle the fusion spells, so you need to play 2 copies of the fusion spells, and 1 copy of each of the monsters of the fusions, Anaconda, and materials. Now, the good thing about these cards is that they're not really bricks. Red Eyes Fusion on its own can win games. Yes, you cannot do anything else, but if you put your Dragoon in the extra monster zone, then you have your Widow Anchors for free, so you can have more disruption this way. And Neos Fusion is not something that locks you completely, right? Red Eyes Fusion does. It locks you from special summoning for the rest of this turn, so you can just use whatever you want of your Link monsters and then slam your Neos Fusion to clear the board. Also, this card is a huge bait for Dragoon decks, because they have to negate this. Otherwise, you are getting a monster on the field that has 4500 attack. So even if Dragoon has negated something prior to this, then Rainbow Neos can still run over it, and also Rainbow Neos has devastating effects, so this is something that your opponent will most likely negate, and since it was negated and it never resolved, it's not like Red Eyes Fusion that even if it gets touched you can't do anything, so you basically can do whatever you want. And the last card is 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence, running out the hand traps to 9. Now for the extra deck, we play 3 copies of Kagari, of course, recycling your Skystriker Spells, 3 copies of Shizuku, getting that to the end phase. I am playing 3 Hayate, which I'm playing 3 Hayate in pretty much any Skystriker build I have. I know people have been playing 2, but I find myself summoning the 3rd one quite often, to be honest, because like I said, if you don't have the fusion stuff of the deck, because sometimes you cannot get 2 monsters on the field very early, especially if your link monster does not survive a turn. So this is why you need to be able to push, and this third Hayate can actually be what wins you the game. You are playing 2 copies of Pot of Avarice, but if you're recycling the fusion materials, then you're not recycling Hayate. You have basically 1 free space for a monster to recycle, because you're recycling 2 fusion materials, Anaconda and the fusion monster, and the monster you're going to be including with them is most likely Kagari, let's be honest. You're not recycling Hayate, so this is why I play 3. 1 copy of Kaino to prevent OTKs, 2 copies of Zeke. I am playing 2 copies of Zeke even since Widow Anchor went to 3, because you're stealing your opponent's monsters a lot now, so you need to be able to get rid of them without having to use multi-roll, because you want to use multi-roll before you use your Widow Anchor just to make sure that your Widow Anchor resolves. So this is why you need something to lick off, and this is much better than a Phoenix, because you can link it off afterwards for a Shizuku, so you can get a search during the end phase, which is much better. Also, Zeke has the effect of sending Area 0 to the grave herself, so you can get another monster on the field this way. And the last link monster is Anaconda, because like I said, it's very important. This deck is basically the main win condition with Skystrikers, the monsters playing a secondary role for trying to get more advantage and trying to get the cards to make sure that Anaconda resolves. And for the fusion monsters, we have 1 Dragoon and 1 Rainbow Neos. Rainbow Neos is insane for this deck for multiple reasons. First of all, just playing Dragoon means that your Anaconda doesn't do anything afterwards. With this deck, if your Anaconda survives a turn, which is very likely to survive because you are playing a lot of hand traps, and with Dragoon, if you negate maybe your opponent's normal summon and then the hand traps stop the rest, then they will not be able to run over your Anaconda, and if it stays on the field, you can then summon your Rainbow Neos, and this is just OTK on the field, because the Dragoon will have 4000, Rainbow Neos is 45, and with Anaconda with your 500, then you basically 9000 damage on the field. But also this card is really good going second, because it makes Neos Fusion a big threat, because this one can clear fields on its own. So it sends a monster you control to the grave to shuffle all monster your opponent controls to the deck. This is cost, by the way, so it's not like your opponent can stop this with something like an Effect Veiler if they don't know how this card works. You can send a spell or trap from you control to the grave to shuffle all spells and traps your opponent controls to the deck, so it has a counter for backrow decks as well. Or you can send a card from the top of your deck to the grave to shuffle all cards in your opponent's grave into the deck. So this card has a lot of utility, it's very powerful, and it's a threat that your opponent has to deal with, or it has to make sure it doesn't hit on the field, so this makes your Neos Fusion a bait, so you can do everything else. But this is not the real threat. The Dragoon is always the real threat, because it's much better than Rainbow Neos, but people do not really think that you can possibly summon both during the same turn, so they will negate the Neos Fusion, and then they will just get baited, because you can then use your Anaconda for your Red Eyes Fusion to get your Dragoon, and this one is the one that will clear the field as well. So this is why this is really good. This is why I'm also playing Monster Reborn, because these 2 monsters are really powerful to get back. You cannot get back your Rainbow Neos, unfortunately, but you can get back your Anaconda, and by shuffling back the materials, you can use Anaconda's effect, which is another interruption with Shark Cannon. Then you can use it on your opponent's Anacondas if your opponent is playing that too, to use its effect, or you can just Monster Reborn back the Dragoon. Yes, it will not be able to pop anything because it hasn't been fusion summoned with any vanilla monsters, but it still has a negate effect and the protection effect of its own, so this is why it's really good. Another thing about this deck is that because I play a lot of these bricks that I mentioned, I don't play Upstart Goblin, because it's not really optimal to get 3 spells in the grave very early right now. You don't really have anything to gain from doing that, because Engage is banned. You will eventually get 3 spells in the grave, because Anaconda helps with that as well, and you have a lot of spells, so you don't really worry about that. But Upstart Goblin might draw you another brick, because you do play a lot of them, so you'd rather not draw anything else and try to play your hand out, because 50-50ing a good card and a bad card with Upstart Goblin is very bad. So this is why Monster Reborn is much better. So yep, that's the deck, guys. It's a very spicy Skystriker list. It's not the most optimal build, like I said, but it's definitely more fun than what you're used to seeing out there. So if you want to try out a different version of the deck that is most likely going to win you a lot of games and be a lot of fun, then this list is for you. And I hope that we get maybe Engage back sometime, or maybe new support. We'll have to wait and see, but the deck can only get better, and this is why I just love this deck so much. So yep, if you enjoyed this video, guys, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming videos, and we'll see you next time.